Welcome once again, fellow warriors, to the blood-stained arena that is the worst fighting game, the ultimate worldwide competition to crown the king of the crappiest fist. And when you're talking about crappy and fighting games, typically the one system that comes to most people's minds is the mighty fun machine known as the
Nintendo Ultra 64.
While it had oodles of 3D platformers, first-person shooters, lots of 4-player mayhem in a variety of genres, and it also had a selection of fighters, plenty of exclusive ones, mind you, but I think we can all agree they were of varying qualities. Because of the N64's architecture favoring 3D graphics, you saw very few traditional fighting games ever come out for it, aside from MK Trilogy and KI Gold, kinda, which meant that the vast majority of then current arcade hits saw ports to the PlayStation and Saturn instead. To fill this void, there were a number of 3D-based button bashers like Fighter's Destiny 1 and 2, Dark Rift, Mace, Flying Dragon, and our contender today, Konami's Deadly Arts. Now, of all those games I just mentioned, Deadly Arts is, factually, the most critically lambasted of the bunch. Back in 1998, it got KTFO'd by just about every major publication willing to review it. A 4 out of 10 from Edge, a 3.4 out of 10 from GameSpot, a 3.2 from IGN, and damn, even Famitsu gave it a 19 out of 40 in their aggregate review, which coming from them meant it was nigh unplayable. But we'll only know for sure once we get Deadly Arts in the ring. This is as good a time as any to clarify. Even though I've been using the name Deadly Arts up until this point in the video, European and Japanese gamers might know it better as G.A.S.P, Fighters Nextreme. And if you're thinking, oh, I bet that acronym is complete horseshit, well, guess what? You'd be right. It somehow stands for Generation of Arts, Speed, and Power, something that the game makes abundantly clear in its intro. So I guess G.A.S.P actually makes it the far more accurate moniker, because despite the North American version claiming it contains deadly arts, it really doesn't. I mean, there's no disembowelments, neck snaps, or head explosions. Lying bastard. Regardless of the name, it has a poor reputation no matter which version you played, and this is most likely due to a combination of the inexperienced team that developed it and the fact that fighting game DNA never truly ran in Konami's blood, despite the fact that they developed one of the earliest examples of the genre, Yi Ar Kung Fu. It was a big hit in the arcade, and was one of, if not the first game that stepped away from all the rule-based martial arts simulators seen up to that point, and instead prioritized special moves, a cast of eclectic characters, energy bars, and other elements that really helped establish the genre. Konami's subsequent attempts to capitalize on this success, however, never really hit. Galactic Warriors, Martial Champions, and Tournament Fighters, as loved as it is, didn't even get close to the commercial success of their other franchises like Castlevania, Metal Gear, and Contra, and even farther away from the likes of Street Fighter II or Fatal Fury. This situation was not helped by the fact that Konami Computer Entertainment Osaka, the team behind Deadly Arts, only first formed in 1994 and had cut their teeth exclusively on sports titles like NBA Give and Go, Nagano Winter Olympics, and the International Superstar Soccer Series. Although they eventually did make the leap over to action with the first N64 Goemon. So, Fighters Nextreme, be aware I'm liberally going to flip-flop between both names, was their very first fighting game, and while they certainly shot for the stars with a number of unique features, grasping the basics of what makes a great playing fighting game seems to have escaped them. As previously mentioned, Deadly G.A.S.P has an intro. It's a pretty decent one for the time, actually reminded me quite a bit of the one seen in Fighter's Destiny. That good impression continues into the character select screen, where you have decent artwork, bright, easily defined characters, and 2 distinct costumes for each fighter. Now, as for the designs themselves, well, it's really a mixed bag. Certain characters give off a Fighting Vipers or Last Bronx vibe, which is no bad thing, while others are just a little too basic to be very interesting. We have Kai, Azami, Miki, Serena, Kaoru, Kongo, Sakai, and finally Kyoya. Jimmy Kyoya. Topping things off, there's also 2 bosses, the first being Guriki and finally Reiji, a rather odd fellow who can transform into 2 even odder final forms. As to why all these kooky characters are throwing hands, I have no idea. The game itself lacks even the barest shred of story, and the instruction manual only marginally more so. Apparently, all 8 fighters received a letter inviting them to a fighting contest. And nothing. That's it. Yeah, that's literally it. There's no indication of what you even get for winning this tournament. There's just no story. And if any of you tries to tell me that there's some sort of companion manga out there that fills in these blanks, well, fuck off with that. And if you thought you could glean some story details from each character's ending, I'll save you the time by telling you, no you can't. The game has 0 endings, not a 1. Beat the final boss, and it just cuts to credits. Now, if you can get your hands on the Japanese or European manuals, you can at least learn a bit about the roster, as this information was removed from the North American manual by some madman at Konami USA for whatever reason. Many of them are either high school or college students who have studied martial arts and are simply looking for a challenge or to prove themselves, but there are a few weirder outliers. Sakai wants to build up his body by fighting beasts. Kongo wants to prove professional wrestling is the greatest sport in the world. Spoilers, it is.
The cream of the crop!
And Kyoya is a literal serial killer who enjoys doing crime for his own purpose. I mean, don't we all? Anyway, Reiji's profile actually does give a crumb of narrative by saying every year he holds a competition to see who he can fight to be known as the strongest. Okay, sure. Let's move on to what the game actually looks like. And well, it's not terrible. Honestly, I've seen worse. I mean, yeah, the textures are really, really low quality, and some of the background elements are composed of like 3 to 4 polygons at most, but the characters look fine, and the anime aesthetic they have going on has aged pretty well. There's also some nice environmental flourishes, like falling snow, fire casting light on the characters, and some decent transparency effects. The stages themselves have a lot going on in general, and while 1 or 2 of them aren't particularly flashy or memorable, the majority of them at least have a unique look. The music is pretty solid as well. It is a Konami game after all, and is composed of a lot of dance and house sounding stuff. I doubt many of you are going to be putting this on your current playlists, but considering how many third-party N64 efforts skimped out on the sound with low-quality compositions that were crushed to shit, what's here is pretty decent. So honestly, aside from the game's lack of story/endings, the presentation is overall pretty sound. It's not amazing by any stretch, but when you go back to almost 25-year-old N64 games, you typically see way worse stuff. But we're gonna see if that luck lasts once I start talking about the... At its core, G.A.S.P. Fighters Arts is a pretty simple game, while taking more than its fair share of inspiration from Virtua Fighter. You have punch, kick, guard, and an evade button. The first 3 behave pretty much exactly like any title from AM2. Guard and punch produces a throw, forward and kick usually does a knee, there's tidy 3 to 4 hit combos, and you can do a follow-up jumping attack on a grounded foe. Evade is where things start to differ. Holding the button then moving around lets you essentially navigate the arenas in pretty much any direction, which you're gonna need to do because the arenas themselves are not simple, flat expanses of space. There's tons of crap lying all over. Rocks, lanterns, tombstone, mine carts, and everything is walled in on each side, which is a whole other thing. Characters can also do a taunt, but I have no idea what they do. The first, not so great issue with all of this is that objects can regularly hamper a fight, as you can often get stuck near them momentarily as they occupy real 3D space, unlike a box or a barrel in, say, Street Fighter. It's not debilitating or anything, it doesn't completely stop you in your tracks, but then another issue does start to crop up: the camera itself. Since there's so many objects, obstructions, fences, and walls, the camera finds itself placed behind them a lot, which tends to block your view even more. And when I say even more, I mean all the fucking time. They did add transparency to all of these elements, but it doesn't alleviate the issue all that much. And what's worse is that all of these transparency effects, dipping in and out, seem to have an adverse effect on the frame rate. Most of the time it's fairly solid, but once a lot of objects get in the way, things will often slow down for a second or two, which gets annoying after a while. While I get they were trying to add some depth to the arenas with, stuff to interact with, I think simplifying them and clearing out some of the clutter would have been the better choice in the long run. I mentioned the walls being a whole other thing earlier, and they are, but fortunately it does swing more towards being a positive. You can actually jump off most of these surfaces to either escape an incoming attack or rebound with a strike of your own, which can actually prove to be pretty useful. You can do a default jumping attack or do specific commands with each fighter, which will result in something more powerful. It's a neat extra flourish to the combat, and while a few other franchises let you do similar things, Deadly Arts is the only N64 fighting game that has this feature. Oh wait, you can do it in fucking Xena. In addition to all of this, some walls can even break open after a good hit, which can then lead to a ring out. And it's like, damn, big ups for all these ideas with the stages. I just think maybe it was a bit too ambitious of an idea to pull off on the N64. I can totally see this working better if it was a Dreamcast or PS2 game, but as it is, and along with the inconsistent performance, navigating the arenas feels just a bit too clunky. There's one final wrinkle to the gameplay that I have to mention. If you're like me, and I know I am, whenever you have a life lead, you'll scum the timer until it reaches 0, awarding you a victory, which is something you absolutely cannot count on in Deadly Arts. The game tallies up health, fighting technique, and other factors, and awards each player points. Whoever scores higher is the one who takes the round. Now, I imagine it's exceedingly rare that someone who was losing would have scored higher, but I mean, it has to have happened at some point, right? Has any player won G.A.S.P Grand Finals via points? Let me know about this stupid question I'm asking about in the comments below. I betcha Guile Windquote knows. Let's move on to modes and features, which is an area Deadly Nextream excels in. You have an arcade ladder versus mode, team versus mode, tag versus, a fully featured practice mode, and probably what it's best known for, Create a Fighter. Team versus is basically KOF style elimination. Tag is exactly what it sounds like, but with a slight twist. You fight through a series of opponents and then pick and choose who you want on your team after you defeat them, and can then freely tag them in whenever you want, which is actually pretty cool. The practice mode gives you access to a full command list and is paramount if you want to get decent with a particular character, as there is zero, I repeat, zero move lists on the internet, at least as far as I can find. Create a Fighter is more interesting than good. It lets you essentially build your fighter's moveset from the ground up, letting you pick and choose specific buttons, combos, and specials from each opponent you conquer, swapping in what you want and ditching the moves you don't. Unfortunately, your visual customization options are severely limited. You have 6 to 7 pre-made clothing sets for your character in either sex, 4 to 5 hairstyles, and you can only swap between preset color patterns, which means you can't even pick individual colors from a wider selection. What this means essentially is that you can make maybe 14 or so distinct looking characters before you start making clones with negligible differences. And the only real point to making a created character is to level them up, save them on your N64 controller pack, and invite people over to play against them. Yo, Justin, want to fly 3,000 miles to my place so you can fight my creative character in deadly arts?
Yeah. No thanks, bro.
Yeah, I mean, that's fair. So here's a downer. Despite having solid, if not spectacular mechanics and lots of modes and features, if your core game doesn't feel good to play, then it's not good to play. And Deadly Arts does not feel good to play. There's a lot to dislike here, I can tell you that for free. Just about every element, from the movement to the attacking to the animation, all work together to make sure you're always having a bad time. Moves come out really inconsistently, so if you're not super precise with every input, things just don't happen, especially specific combos. But especially throws. The animation lacks a lot of fluidity, so many attacks feel really stiff and unsatisfying to land. The hitboxes are all over the place, so sometimes when you're right in front of your opponent, things mysteriously whiff. Everything just feels sloppy, sluggish, and unpolished. The issues with the camera, frame rate, and background objects are annoying enough on their own, but when you combine that with the actual control and feel of Deadly Arts, it elicits an almost immediate and visceral gasp of disappointment. This really is a shame because, like I already outlined, there's some good ideas here, and the presentation is solid all around, and even though I vaguely remember liking this game back when I was in short pants, going back to it in 2022, well, the moment-to-moment gameplay is way rougher than I remember. Another childhood memory completely dashed. Alright, cue the title transition, let's wrap this up. As I said at the top, Konami never cracked the code in delivering a truly great fighting game that actually caught on, particularly in the realm of 3 dimensions, and their failure with Deadly Arts apparently didn't teach them very much. Kensai Sacred Fist, Lightning Legend, Fighting Bujutsu, Battle Trist, Castlevania Judgment, none of these achieved any tangible measure of success, or at least enough that Konami felt any of them were worth continuing. So I really shouldn't be surprised that the oh-so-memorable tale of Kai and the zombie dude and the rest is just another one of those forgettable misfires. So, with all that out in the open, where does Generation of Arts, Speed, and Power actually land in our tier list of trash? Like so many others, it's really the game feel that cuts everything off at the knees, humbling it so that it falls face first into the green cloud that hangs around the lepers of the fairly stinky category. There you go. You're now the meat inside the shack and balls sandwich. And with that, warriors, another round of carnage-filled combat comes to a close. And if you'd like to throw more lambs to the slaughter in our tournament of tragedy to dethrone the mighty, omnipotent Criticom, do let me know in the comments below. Until then, I'll see you next time on The Worst Fighting Game.